Hi, my name's Wardell. I'm a beekeeper and a bee researcher, and I'd like to introduce a short series of videos on honeybee nutrition. Talk a little bit about why we feed, what we feed, when to feed the bees, that kind of thing. So let's get started. Tools. Beekeepers use a lot of tools. We have a hive tool, we've got queen excluders, we've got products to help control mites in the hive and things like diseases and things like that. Those are all tools that we use in the hive to manage our bees and manage other pests in the hive as well. Lots of tools. There's one tool that we use that you probably don't really think of as a tool, and that's nutrition. Nutrition is a tool that beekeepers can use to manage the populations in the hive. It's an important tool, and it's important because really in a beehive there's three populations of bees in the hive. We know about the three castes, the queen, the worker, the drone, but most people don't think about the three different populations of bees. The immatures, the eggs, the larvae, the pupa, that's one population of bees in the hive. And then there's the house bees, the nurse bees, the wax workers, the pollen processors, the nectar processors, even the undertakers in the hive, and eventually the guard bees at the entrance. And then the third population of bees in the hive is our field force, the bees that are working in the field. Each one of those populations has different nutritional needs. And as a beekeeper, we have to think about that. So what is there to think about? Well, what do bees eat? Bees eat nectar and pollen. Nectar is largely a carbohydrate, sugar, sucrose that the bees bring back to the hive, add enzymes to it, and break it down into its primary components, which are monosaccharides, fructose, and glucose. And then the pollen that they bring back to the hive. What is that? That's their protein source. That's all of their amino acids, the lipids that they need, the enzymes, the vitamins, all that kind of stuff they need is in the pollen. So how do we manage the food going into the hive? Well, some beekeepers plant supplemental forage, plant trees and fence rows, or plant fields full of flowers for the bees, or move their bees to specific fields of flowers. That's one way to manage nutrition. Another way is to use supplemental nutrition, adding sugar syrup to the hive at critical times, feed the bees when they're light. And then there's also protein supplements that we can add into the hive that mimic natural pollen. Nobody's really ever developed a complete replacement for pollen yet. Getting close, but not yet. But these supplements can help stimulate the brood production in the hive. How do they do that? What does putting a protein supplement in the hive do for the hive? Well, it's putting extra protein into the hive, and to be honest, it's in the way. When we put a half a kilo glop of protein supplement on the top bars, what happens is the bees see that and they have to remove it. And the only way to remove it is to go up there and eat it. Tastes good. It's got a lot of sugar in it, a lot of proteins. Bees recognize it as food and they want to move it. Well, the only way they can move it is to lick it, eat it, one bite at a time. They don't bite it with their mandibles and chew, take big hunks and masticate it like we do with our jaws. They eat by licking it. So that half a kilo of protein supplement disappears one lick at a time. And in consuming that, then those bees have extra protein in their bodies, and their hypopharyngeal glands that are in their face start producing extra royal jelly, and that royal jelly is then fed to all the larvae in the hive. And the larvae get big and fat, and you can notice well-fed larvae in the hive because they're big, plump, glistening. They look wet, and that's all the royal jelly that's in the bottom of the cell. If you look at the hive and the larvae look shriveled and dry, they're not getting enough protein. They're not getting enough royal jelly. So that protein supplement, or the pollen and the nectar that we put in the hive, is really the groceries in the hive, if you will. The groceries that the bees then turn into food. So they, just like you, when you go to the store, you bring food home and then you cook it to eat it. We put the food in the hive and the bees cook it. The nurses cook it. The nurses are the ones that turn that protein into available food. It's royal jelly that drives the hive. So when you put that protein supplement in the hive, you're stimulating royal jelly production, which then all the larvae get fed. And the interesting thing about it is if they're producing more royal jelly than those larvae can use, what happens then? What do they do with it? Well, they share it. Here, you have a little. You have some. You have some. They share it with the other adults. Even the field bees. Field foragers cannot digest pollen. They've lost the ability to digest pollen and mostly eat carbohydrates to keep themselves going. But they can digest royal jelly. So if there's too much royal jelly being produced in the hive, it goes to all the bees, and protein level in the hive goes up, and along with that, longevity goes up. Bees live longer. Well-fed bees live longer. Just like people, we all need protein in our bodies, and if we're not getting it, we're going to shorten our life too. So we've talked about the 3 different populations in the hive, and each one of those populations has different needs. The larvae, of course, need worker jelly, and they need a little bit of pollen. As they get older, they get a little pollen in their diet, and they develop. House bees have nutritional needs of their own. A lot of carbohydrates. It takes, to produce that wax, takes a lot of sugar. And as they get into the field stages, they're mostly carbohydrate feeding, but they can use some of this extra royal jelly that we can produce through supplemental feeding. So that's just something to think about as we contemplate honeybee nutrition, is watching your hive. A beekeeper needs to be proactive, not reactive. And so when you're thinking about a honey flow, you want to think 6 weeks out ahead of time to make sure you're getting the population of bees you need. If 6 weeks ahead of that honey flow, you don't have a lot of pollen coming in, a lot of nectar coming in, you need to stimulate the hive with supplemental feeding. Well, that's all we'll do today, but the next episode we'll talk a little about why we feed the bees and what to feed them. Okay? Look forward to it. Bye.